I'm Bryan Hyde, and I'm telling it like it is.
So when you get a notice that calls you to jury duty in the mail, what's your first reaction? I think for most people it's something like, oh man, this is going to take time out of my life. Oh, it sounds boring, and I wish I could get out of it. In fact, a lot of people devote a lot of time and effort to getting out of jury duty. It's a huge mistake, and here's why. One of the most important functions that we can perform as citizens is to sit on a jury. Why is the jury so important? Well, consider, the jury was important enough that the founders included the mention of the jury in the 5th, 6th, and 7th Amendments of the Bill of Rights. It's a very essential check on government power, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why that is. First of all, we go back to the case in 1670 of William Penn, yes, the guy for whom Pennsylvania was named, being charged with preaching a Quaker sermon on the streets of England. At that time, you had to be part of the Anglican Church to have any kind of legitimate religious point of view. Well, William Penn was a Quaker. He preached a sermon, a crowd gathered, and the king had him arrested and charged with unlawful assembly. Now, the jurors at his trial were given the facts of the case, and the fact of the matter was, yeah, he preached a sermon, he drew a crowd, but 4 of those jurors refused to convict him of the crime that he was accused of. The judge was incensed, and he ordered those 4 jurors held without drink, without meat, without fire, without tobacco. Pretty big punishments for that time, but he wanted them to change their vote. They refused. And upon appeal, another court held that those jurors were absolutely within their right not to convict William Penn. They felt that the law itself was an injustice, the way that it was being applied against him. From there, we have the precedent being set in the laws of England, and then coming down through the common laws right into our own legal system to where the jury has the power to either judge the law as being appropriately applied or not. But that's not something that judges or lawyers will tell you today, and I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. See, in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote that governments derive their powers, at least their just powers, from the consent of the governed. Who does the jury represent in the courtroom? It represents the people, the governed. And that means the jury is the most powerful entity in that courtroom. We've been taught that the judge, the one we stand for, the one in the flowing black robes, is the most powerful entity in that courtroom, but he's not. The judge is there as a referee to make sure that procedures are followed and that the procedures are observed and everything is done fairly. The ultimate call that's made in that courtroom is the jury, who can decide either guilty or not guilty. And I'll give you a couple examples of how that may look today. Some people, what this brings up is the concept of jury nullification, which to some people means, hey, that's how racists in the South got away with crimes against blacks. That's how O.J. got away with what most everybody believes was murder. And they're right. But the juries also were the ones who nullified laws that required fugitive slaves to be returned to their owners. And here's a really likely scenario. A missionary couple returning from a mission in Mexico. Unbeknownst to them, someone placed a small package of drugs in their trailer. And as they were going across the border back into America, a drug dog alerted on their belongings. They searched, they found the drugs, and the couple was charged with trying to smuggle drugs into the United States. Now, the fact that this was a couple who had been serving a church mission, who had no knowledge of this being placed in their belongings, didn't matter to the law. Federal authorities charged them under mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines because the jury found, yes, they did have the drugs in their possession trying to cross the border. They were sentenced to 10 years prison. No possibility of parole. Mandatory minimums. An informed juror, one who understood that their duty was not only to judge the facts of the case, yes, they had the drugs in their trailer, but the law itself, was it being correctly applied, would have voted to acquit. And it only takes one single juror to hang the jury and otherwise cause a mistrial to take place. But instead, an older couple went to prison. Another example, a nurse traveling to New York went to see the 9/11 memorial. She had a concealed firearm with her, and when she got to the memorial, saw the sign that said no firearms allowed. Trying to do the right thing, she went to the authorities and said, "Where can I check my gun?" They said, "Wait right here," at which point police officers were summoned who arrested her and are charging her with carrying an illegal weapon in New York City, which she's facing the likelihood of 3 years in prison for possession of a firearm. If you were sitting on that jury, Would you want to send her to prison, or would you be one of those who judge the facts of the case as well as the law? See, this is the thing. The jury's job is not to see that the letter of the law prevails in every single case. They have a much more important job. Their job is to make sure that procedures and due process are being followed fairly, and that the law is actually being applied fairly. And if the law is being used in a heavy-handed or tyrannical way, the jury decision is what stops government power from being abused. So the next time you get a jury summons in your mail, look on it with a chance to be a part of supporting freedom as opposed to an inconvenience. If you want to find out more, go to FIJA, that's Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org. They can tell you everything you need to know. I'm Bryan Hyde, and I'm telling it like it is.